welcome to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. I'm glad you've made the connection and are with us today. I'm Lori Fitz, your host. And as you know, the goal of our show is to explore a wide range of topics that challenge us to see ourselves, our community, and the world around us, that get us thinking, get us imagining, get us exploring new ideas, and perhaps inspired or challenged to do just a bit more because we've made the connection. Our topic today is about the holidays, and it's about the art of flourishing, reframing the holidays to create healthy connections. And part of that for me is defining flourishing and maybe redefining flourishing. And Rick Bernardo is co-hosting, and he's going to help me with looking at how do we define flourishing. What do you think?
Flourishing, it reminds me of a plant just blossoming.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me that that's not the entire plant's life. Mm-hmm. It's not that.
Well, but it can.
Always, but it can
be. It
but
can
there's
flourish.
some plants can flourish. You know what? Just because it reminds me of blossoming, they can flourish in other ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all flowers.
But the holidays kind of feel like flowers.
Yeah.
They kind of feel like the flower of the plant, and for me, we've had so many messages, since day one about what the holidays mean. It's what it means to the family. In the good old Hallmark, it's what does it mean in a relationship, which usually is someone out in the country that comes back from their high school reunion and falls in love with the guy at the seed store.
Yeah, that's the story.
Yes, that's the story in every which way. And some of them we resonate with and we long for, or we feel bad that we don't have that. Trust me, I don't worry about going after the seed store guy. But it's how do we take what images feel right for us and what ones feel like they're a burden or we can't live up to. It just seems like, in general, humans, we take our ideas, we take passions, sometimes we take our dreams, we put them on the sidelines a little bit because others seem more important, or a storyline from a TV seems more important. And we accept that script and we figure out, what are we supposed to do? Are we doing enough? We've got sometimes self-limiting beliefs like I can't do this all, or even if I am doing it, am I an imposter while I'm doing it? All the things that, ultimately I think it's about fearing, doing it wrong. Are we doing the holidays wrong? And what I want to explore in this show and next show is, what would it look like if we maybe reframed and recreated intentionally what we want for ourselves? And in that, can we better flourish? That's the big question.
I like it. Yeah. Good idea.
I have to admit that, when I hear often things come up like de-stressing, here's some tips on de-stressing, I stress out with them.
Yeah.
I do. It's like, because they always look, the person who's suggesting the de-stressing always looks perfect and has got their life together. And it's just like, I feel like, again, I can't do that. I think I'd rather get a tips on de-stressing from someone who's like their life's a mess.
If I looked and sounded like they were a wreck, I would listen.
I would, and it's sort of like survival techniques. I like that. That works better for me. But it's all about the stuff, isn't it? Really, bottom line, it's the stuff that piles up for ourselves.
There's so many stuff. Mm-hmm. And I always, when I teach ethics, I talk about the voices in our heads because we are legion, Mm-hmm. And so and I think we get miserable when we can't balance these voices with expectations, which you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we have to come to peace with that somehow, somewhere, and listen to all of them. But we can only do one thing or be several things at a time, especially during the holidays. So that's the trick, is how do we have an expectation, or sometimes just let it go for a moment.
Yeah.
Otherwise we get wrecked.
I'm so glad you brought up the let it go for a moment, because we have a song. Before we go into the song, there are things that I do love about the holidays. Now, I don't like hearing Christmas songs in August, but I do like the holiday songs when I'm ready for them in December. You know, they're rich. And they put me in a nice place. And we've got a song that you actually were singing.
I was singing it just 10 years ago, actually, right around today at the Music Box Theater. I don't know if it was a Music Box or the Loring Theater in Minneapolis, but I was part of a number of bands at the time. One was Spirit Garage, and we had a Spirit Garage Christmas, a garage band Christmas is what we had on this evening.
I love it.
And it had some standards, but also had some songs like Snowplow Dave. And this is me. I have my little Frank Sinatra hat, and I did a little Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra version of Let It Snow. And I do a little introduction to the song because it's a 1940s standard.
And there are some things to cherish in the holidays, and Let It Snow, I think, is one of those to cherish. So we'll have Patrick play it for us.
This song was written by Sammy Kahn and Jewel Stein in 1945. Now, there are only so many ways to say some things, but here's an especially sweet way of saying, "Baby, let me stay with you." The weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, but I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I'll hate going out in the storm. But if you really hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbye. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. All the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbye. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it snow, snow, snow. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Clap, clap, clap.
Yeah.
That's great, Rick.
I had to practice, but
It's nice. It's
but I
really
reached the note at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was John Kearns on the guitar doing and a number of other amazing musicians. And these events by Spirit Garage seasonally are the most refreshing Christmas music. It's not anything you get tired of because they have their own spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was a fun memory.
What I like about the song especially is, the weather outside is frightful. To me, that's like a symbol of like a lot of things around the holidays.
Yeah,
have a little frightful sense to it. I mean, right now, my house is a total wreck. I mean, it looks like a tornado went through each room just because work's busy, life's busy, I have a little farm, getting the outside farm all put to sleep for the winter, all of that. And it's a wreck. And it's not inside that's delightful.
Yeah,
it's like way inside.
Way inside. And way outside, I have a vivid memory of trying to make it home from work about 6 years ago in a blizzard at the end of the day. And ever see the film with Sandra Bullock, Gravity? where
Oh,
she's
yes,
trying
yes,
she's
we're
trying to
coming
get
to
back
space.
to Earth in space,
Yeah.
and it's like, just point me in the right direction, and that's what it was like trying to get home. I couldn't see if I was on the road anymore. Am I going across somebody's lawn? Am I on the highway or what? So
Which is always the guess in Minnesota. It's the game we play. Where's the road?
It was so hard to see.
Yeah.
By the time I stepped into my apartment, I fell on the floor like at the end of the film Gravity. Just
and again, that becomes to me another symbol of the holidays. It really is. How do you navigate when everything seems to come at you, and at the same time you want to be able to honor that this is a special time, and how do you make it special when everything doesn't seem going easily? I have friends that have got Amazon gifts, which is great. They didn't have to go out and maybe, brave work, going to all the stores. But, they've lost track of even what they're getting.
Yeah, that's a new twist on.
It becomes insane, and you can start earlier, which is great, but it still becomes, how do we sort it out? How do we get control over, holidays that seem out of control? And how do we figure out who we are and maybe change the story up? I also think that after COVID, we were so fearful of being together.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're together. It's kind of like, how do we do this? Really, how do we do this? Because you can't just go back to everything kind of being the same from the pre-COVID days.
As if there weren't enough layers of confusion and expectation already. Yeah, gotcha.
And I think there's part of us that have the nutcracker vision dream for what everything is going to be like for us, and then there's a disappointment, when we haven't created it, or maybe even a guilt that we haven't done all that we're supposed to do, and today, as I was leaving my chaotic home, I thought for the first time, for me, the holidays are like a great big Chinese puzzle. It will be impossible to solve. It will be impossible to create. But it's how much, can we solve of the puzzle? How much can we get what we want out of the holiday versus, playing out on stage, what it should look like and what it should be.
Yeah.
And instead of dreading the holiday failure, how do we accept that we're only going to get part of the vision of what we think the holiday should be?
And what I'm hearing too is there's a few stories in my childhood and coming up and as an adult that were great holidays, but that's not going to happen again exactly that way. I'm not even the same person, let alone the other people are sometimes not even around. So how do we create another story that we could cherish? It's not going to be the same, and that's a hard balancing act to get in our heads and our hearts.
I also think that sometimes when we gather back with family, there's roles that we get cast back into.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know for many years I was cast back as a 13-year-old, and I acted out like a 13-year-old. By the end of the time, it was there's almost a reason why I'm getting cast in this role. I played that role really well, and but I'm not 13 anymore. So obviously, I can make other choices.
Keep telling yourself that, that helps. It does.
Yes,
we have to sometimes.
But looking at that, I think is important. It's how to make that pause. How to allow ourselves to have a different kind of a moment. In all the chaos, can we take a little bit of a time to, enjoy a candle, just sit with a candle and a cup of coffee and enjoy the light of the candle. And
not get burnt.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Yeah.
But I'm also just
so
taking,
to speak.
Yeah, or burnt out.
Yeah, burnt out or fried or
yeah. What are little things that we can do for ourselves? How can we taste something, really enjoy that taste? How can we take being in the moment and not feeling like we have to live a script?
there's great questions, and it's always like any sort of life. How do you practice it?
Yeah.
It's the question, how do you live into that? How do you actually be that way? And it's I like the idea of there's muscles in us. They're not literal muscles, but they're psychic muscles. They're emotional, they're spiritual muscles. And sometimes it takes a while to find them even, let alone, I didn't know I had that one.
And allow ourselves to let the muscle rest, too.
Yeah, even sometimes that muscle is clenched like crazy, and you still got to find where is it hurting to let it go, even, or where is it tight. And sometimes there's some things that it wasn't until a year ago I realized I was just carrying around, and it was tight all the time. I didn't know. It's been I'm more than 13 years old now.
Yes,
It took a while. Heck.
But a 13-year-old can be very creative, and a 13-year-old can actually recreate things. And our next segment, I'm excited because you've kind of changed up a traditional holiday song in our next segment. I'd like to have that be played. Tell us a little bit about that so we can get the audience.
So the next one is a song called "Were You There?" It's an old standard when they crucified my Lord. But this was done with the same group of musicians from Spirit Garage. But this is called the 40 Project, done also that year, 2013, 2014, around then. And their music this is like a heavy metal version of "Were You There?", which is an old sort of a gospel sort of song.
That you would generally think about in heavy metal.
And what we'll hear later on is I'm at the piano, and I just picked out a couple of notes from the chords, and that became the theme for the rest of the recording. You'll hear me just doing these little things, and then it cranks up.
All right. Well, stay with us. We'll be right back. We're talking about the holidays, how to change them up for ourselves, how to flourish with all the crazies, and some of that is re-scripting, and some of that maybe is also re-looking at even the music and changing it up. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we talk about ideas that matter. And we're talking about the holidays. Surprise, it is the holiday time. But we're also looking at, being able to rewrite the holidays for ourselves and change it up a bit so it better works for ourselves, so that it can be a time of celebration. Sometimes it doesn't feel like celebrating, and it's I'm sorry, but women, I think, especially take on a lot of hard roles during the holidays, where we have to, feel like that we do everything that we need to do at our work. We do everything that we need to do at our home. We do everything that we need to do to bring people together. And we don't often spend time figuring out what we need and how we may want to change things up for ourselves and others around us as well. And when we're enjoying ourselves more, I guarantee those around us will be enjoying themselves more. Speaking of enjoying, our friend Rick Bernardo, who's the co-host of our show, has brought some music for the holidays for us for this show. And we heard in the last segment a little bit of his Let It Snow. So if you missed it, you've got to go back and listen to it on our podcast. And this one, we previewed a little bit, but preview it again. You've changed up some traditional music.
Yes, this is "Were You There?" The rest of it, when they crucified my Lord. Which is an old gospel hymn, church service sort of thing. But this is the Spirit Garage Band again. This is a recording called the 40 Project, where we worked for a number of months to get different versions of old standards and some new standards like Snowplow Dave onto this holiday album that I can still listen to any time of year. It doesn't get me sick of it. But this is "Were You There?", which is normally kind of slow and very melodic and beautiful. But this is me at the piano. And you'll hear some notes, and I'm literally just picking out certain notes from the chords of the song, which is normally what a musician does. Is they go, how do I create a theme for my part in this orchestration? And so I'm literally doing that. And the engineer goes, let's use that for the whole song.
There we go.
And so you hear me at the keyboard, and then I don't know if we're going to hear the whole song, but at least in another minute after that, and you'll hear this, however however long you want to do it.
It all works. Patrick, bring out as our engineer. Bring on the song.
This is Were You There?
Although some may argue that that's an Easter song.
Yeah.
But it still has that traditional, church, going to church feeling song, but totally revamped with even sounded like some Asian influences and multicultural.
Sitar in there.
Yeah.
I was going to mention one other thing about that. Oh, later on in the song, were you there when he crossed the Stone Arch Bridge? Oh. Were you there when? And there's we Minneapolis-ize it at the last couple of verses. So,
well, maybe we'll bring that back at the last segment, and we can listen to some of the Minneapolitan?
Mini apples. I don't know, small apples somewhere. Yeah.
No, but it allowed us to just think about things differently, right? It doesn't have to be. There are some, like my stepdaughter, I absolutely adore her. She wants things absolutely the same, and we need to watch The Christmas Story, and that's part of the tradition.
Sure.
And it is joyful. I mean, we're all around watching, the cute little story, The Christmas Story, but there's part of me that goes, okay, what else can we do that can add to the tradition each year without disturbing those that really want, the things to happen over and over again that make them feel good and make them feel secure. Our brain likes to feel secure. It likes to feel like these are things that we can depend on, that we can trust. But when did those things become a burden to others? Right?
Yeah. And that's a lot of my life is just like I had a certain understanding and then now what?
Yeah.
Different information, different possibility, different circumstances, and it's like one long dance. By the end of my life, I hope I'm all danced out.
Well, I don't know about danced out.
It'll happen.
Yes, it probably will.
But I hope I have all the steps down is what I'm
good.
trying to say.
Well, you'll have many steps to choose from. Let's have it that way. But a couple of things that I've been thinking about is how do we mentally just approach the holiday season? And then how are we emotionally relating to others? If if during the holidays we're so stressed out because we haven't gotten the house cleaned and we haven't made all the foods that we think that we should, and the gifts aren't completely wrapped, and my guess is, I know from my own experience, I'm not the most emotionally available at that moment in time when I'm living in that stress. How do I reframe it so, it becomes more joyful? How can we hold joy a little differently around the holidays so that it's not, just the Hallmark card of, boy, I'm picking on Hallmark, aren't I? I don't mean to. It's just it seems to keep coming up. But how do we recognize joy in a new way? That it doesn't have to be just the red bells on the card, and saying, joy to the world and peace on earth. When we know that there are some challenges around joy, and we're going to go into even more some challenges in the year ahead in looking at joy, with a lot of choices that we're going to be making on even leadership for our country. And peace on earth is not something that we're experiencing right now. There's a lot of heartache.
Well, one thing that I think all of us could keep in mind, not should, but if we want some peace of mind and some joy, is to also let go of that we have to be joyful for everything and the whole time, because things come up and emotions are normal. Sometimes in the holidays is when I feel even more centered in my some aspect of my spiritual journey and my spiritual self and my deepest self. So I'm even more sensitive to issues of justice and injustice than I ever am. And that's like, I don't like not being joyful, but that's okay. That energy I generally use for something.
I think there's a pressure that we're all supposed to look like we're happy, which can make us unhappy because we're playing a role. So it's sort of like this bizarre thing of like, okay, put a smile on because it's the holidays. And we had a guest, Yvette, that I absolutely adored, and she said, if we're not crying every day, we're not healthy. I mean, we're not really connecting to everything around us because there's some sad things that are happening. So when we think, well, how do I choose joy over pain? I think of another guest that we had that says you have to hold them both. You have to hold both the joy and the pain.
Grief in one hand and joy in the other. Yeah, that was Mark Liebenau. Yeah.
Yeah. And holding them together, I think, allows us not to deny one or the other.
And I need to be, what is that Indian god that got all the arms and hands? That's what I need.
Lots of different emotions there. All kinds of stuff. Yeah. We'll just stick with the two for this show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's a self-awareness and not just playing the script that allows us when something hurts. For years and years, our family almost like re-celebrated the trauma and celebrated, I use loosely, was relived the trauma of my father having a stroke during the holidays. And, it was a series of strokes that led to him being, finally, pretty much incapacitated. And it was like, I always braced myself for the holidays because, there was this family grief of things changed when my dad had this stroke and lost the ability to, talk, or he was aphasic. And that pain in the holidays, either you try and just, for me it was just not think about it. And I, for years, just like didn't do anything in the holidays. I went to Arizona or New Mexico trying to get as far away from the holidays. But at some point, trying to hold both, trying to hold that there was pain, but there was also a connection. He was there. And how did the family come together? How can that be looked at? And still feel the pain that things changed, but you move on and you create a new script for yourself. Now, I don't feel bad that I, for a few years there, went to New Mexico to just sort of escape the holidays because I couldn't handle the holidays and I wanted to rescript. But that was a good pause for me, to just pause and go, okay, what? And I now have some like
sounds good.
Taos angels.
Oh yeah,
that I did bring back. Okay, so here I am. I can like deal with the holidays, but we all have different challenges that we face during the holidays.
Yeah.
And sometimes we want to ignore them. Sometimes we make them the centerpiece and nothing else can exist. but for me, it always comes down to how am I scripting it for myself? I can be my hero, right? I can write the script of what I want for the holidays. Now, whether or not I achieve it all, I can get back to that Chinese box of impossible to solve, but just feel good as how much did I get solved?
Well, at least point in that direction that is more full of possibility, and there's some creativity in it, but you don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket surgeon or a rocket scientist.
I do think that creativity is what brings the real connection together. And I think there's a reason why a lot of people like to do crafts. It's just your way of being able to be creative and do something that allows you to connect with, whether it be your artistic sensibilities or those around you when you give them as gifts. And then the holidays do talk. There is that sense of we should be doing something creative. We should create something, whether it's cookies or a meal or, the kids that bring home those wonderful ornaments that you get to save year after year. And there's something that is there for us to learn from.
I know as we speak, my brother's preparing to take my Italian grandmother's cookie recipe and recreate her cookies from decades and decades ago and send them to different family members.
Well, I do think that getting back to what our show is in terms of making connections, I love this one definition that Brené Brown put together, and that connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. I think that relationship can be with yourself as well. And, are we fully hearing and seeing and being, who we are? It also, I think, how are we relating to our family and our friends? And, how are we creating connections that work for us, that support that flourishing? You used the word, you used the idea of a plant as something that flourishes. Well, a plant has many parts that come together.
Yeah.
How does that happen so that we can grow?
And they don't do it they do it in an environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So inside the soil, but outside in the air and the sun and all of that. So,
well, speaking of the environment and the holiday time, you have written a little piece to react to the Christmas Jesus. Did you want to share that?
There was a mention of by Joe Walsh years ago that if Jesus was among us, he would be a law-abiding gun owner, support the police, and he'd say Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays. And speaking of being sensitive, I was just like, that's kind of a BS. Maybe the nice way to say it is not accurate. So Anyway, I wrote a piece that has gotten around a little bit. That Jesus, for the record, his last name wasn't even Christ, and his middle name wasn't Harold for H. He was known as Yeshua, probably. Of Nazareth. They all have last names at that point. It's like, which Jesus is it? It's the one from Nazareth. And he was known as the one from Galilee and Nazareth, which is kind of known as a hick town among some people. So it wasn't really a great compliment necessarily. And he literally chose to be tortured and killed rather than take up violence. I mean, it wasn't all his choice, but he accepted it, and that's part of the big story there. So his death and his life in so many ways shows that he'd literally rather die than take up arms. And I wrote this piece because I was angry that, just let's be accurate and talk about acceptance and non-judgment. I let go of judgment about – this was Joe Walsh that said that, prompted me. But I let go of judgment about it as long as I could express myself on it.
And how to celebrate another way of looking at Jesus, another way of perhaps more of the peace on earth end of the dedication to this time of year. What can that look like?
And I have to live in tribute to all of my mentors in the past that do know way more than me, and I listen to them because I respect them. So anyway.
Well, in our next segment, we're going to have you share a family story, the Bernardo bedtime story, as another way of sharing how stories can bring us together and what can be the real meaning, the real depth of being together at the holidays. So stay with us. We'll be back, and we'll be hearing a bedtime story from our friend Rick.
It's morning.
I know, but
bedtime.
Thanks to everyone who's continued to support AM 950. Good news, the AM 950 2024 calendar is ready to go.
Welcome back to Connections Radio Show, where we've been just exploring a wide range of ideas about the holidays and how we might want to celebrate what we love, pick those things that mean the most to us, let go of some of the things that maybe we feel like we're not quite getting to, and letting it snow, proverbially, for everything in our life. Just letting the holidays have perhaps less stress and things making us crazy, and more times to just really care about each other and get connected. And with that, we've got a great bedtime story. I'm calling it the Bernardo bedtime story that our friend Rick has agreed to share. So I'd love to just have you just take it away, Rick.
Well, this is a story I tell at the end of all my ethics courses, and whenever I do a presentation on ethics, I generally end it with this because it's about my own acceptance of an inability to accept some things. So, and I always ask anybody listening whether or not you've ever shared a bedroom with a sibling. And normally, that's like, and
are you still speaking to that sibling?
Yeah. Are they in the room anymore, or are they in your life anymore? But I don't go there so much.
Sorry.
But it comes up. I can see people start to quiver. Their lower lip starts to tremble, and so imagine in this scene, to my left, to the audience's right, is my brother's bed. I'm 7 years old. He's 4 years old. All right, we're just kids, and we're sharing the same bedroom. His bed is up against the wall to my left, right in the corner, and to my right is the door to the bedroom, and that's key because down the hall is the bathroom. So there's a choreography that would come up. Every evening, I'd be sleeping 2 to 3 in the morning. Every single night I'd hear, Ricky, I have to go to the bathroom. Would you watch? And he didn't want me to watch him go to the bathroom. He wanted me to watch out for him. So he would somehow make it up because it's dark. That's the whole thing. And he would make it out of his bed. He would get around my bed, somehow down the hall, and then I wouldn't hear him breathe until the light went on. I hear a little click, and then so he survived. And I would hear some goings on, and meanwhile the light is just staring me right in the face, and I'm getting kind of irritated, but I promised I'd watch. And then the light would stay on, and the light would stay on, and it would be like, oh, what's going on? And so, Lori, you tell me, what do you think is going on? The light is on, and he's not coming back. Why do you think?
Terror.
Terror, because he's got to turn that light off.
Exactly.
And it's going to be even darker than when we went there.
It was hard enough to turn it on.
Yeah, even to get there.
Yeah.
Now what?
And he has to turn off, and then it's going into the great unknown as he turns it off.
Yeah, he's considering just sleeping on the toilet for the rest of the night at that point.
At that age, I might have too.
Yeah. So, and so, but eventually I would hear click, and then he would sprint down that hallway. He would literally jump from the door over my bed. I would hear there would be gale force winds over my head, sheets flying. He would crash land like an F-18 fighter jet landing on an aircraft carrier. And then what's the task? He's got to get under a sheet or covers, because a sheet will protect you from a razor-toothed bloody monster.
Well, and at least he's on the bed, because there was always monsters under my bed that could grab my ankle.
And he's got to get in the bed and under the covers, all right? And
so the ankles are safe.
Yeah, exactly. And he's in a ball, and he's still under the cover. And he's, Ricky? Huh? Okay, thank you. Uh-oh. And that went on every night for maybe two years up until this point, except this one night. Everything was just like I told it. And the light went off, and then boom, gale force winds, crash landing like a fighter jet. And then I heard, Ricky? 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 And what he heard was, there is no Ricky. I had gotten tired of doing this.
Uh-oh.
My parents were not happy with how they were woken up that night.
I bet. Poor little guy. But it does sound like something my older brother would have done to me.
I was a very good big brother.
Up until that point.
Except for that part of the story. And to this day, around this time of year, I always find a time, either by phone or in person, to apologize to my brother Tom for that.
For traumatizing.
For traumatizing, right.
Details.
And he will, if sometimes we stay at my dad's house during the holidays, and he'll be like, good night, Ricky, and do not do that again. And
it becomes a family tradition.
And then the tradition now is at least once a year during the winter, I will apologize to him, and I'll let him know that I'll watch out for him.
Oh, and it's such a wonderful request to, take care of me, and we are vulnerable, as children, and especially vulnerable to our older siblings that become sort of like surrogate parents too. And how do we coach that in kids? How do we encourage that? How do we create that, amongst the family? And what I also love is that you're willing to apologize now for many, many years.
It's okay. It's just saying sorry. I me make mistake. It was it's so sometimes humorous, because everybody can identify with the, like, I'm tired of this and I don't know what to do. Kind of in the backstory of it is like this. I'm just like 7 years old. I don't know, how do I stop this? Yeah. Somebody give me some counseling.
And it probably did stop. Is my guess.
Oh yeah, I have no memory of what happened after that. Yeah, I don't know how he survived.
He probably realized that you were not going to be there.
I don't think he wet his bed after that. I don't know what happened.
Probably not, but he probably got brave enough and did not request your service.
I think we worked it out, but that's also part of what you have to do in the holidays, or you don't have to do, but if you don't, there's no joy.
Well, and if there are things that have happened amongst siblings as you've gotten older, how do you let go of some of that stuff and recognize, hey, you were 7, or hey, you were this or that, and let it snow, right? Just let it be. I mean, it might be frightful. It might be all kinds of craziness during the holidays. But how do we burrow into who we are and what we want for ourselves without, taking it away from someone else? I mean, I think connection's also about navigating how to make the connection, navigating on how to come together in such a way that it can at least work pretty well, and not have expectations that it's going to be amazing, but work pretty well to bring folks together, to tell stories.
That'd be pretty good.
Pretty
good, pretty well.
It's the Minnesota style, right?
Yeah.
the you betcha, not so bad. we could have a not so bad holiday.
Yeah.
But with that, why don't we at least have a nice let it snow for us to think about what could that look like for us.
This is me again 10 years ago. delightful. Since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, but I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I'll hate going out in the storm. But if you really hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. All the way home I'll be warm. Fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it snow, snow, snow. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
With that, I encourage all of us to find a way to love each other so, and let the craziness of the holidays just be one of those things that we just let happen and find the connection, because that's what keeps us together and gives us that health and flourish. Have a great holiday.
I'm the host of Exploring Sovereignty with Elizabeth. In this radio show and podcast, we have conversations with heart-centered thought leaders to explore their pathway to becoming free, and we will shine a light on what has been hidden, often in plain sight, what they pay attention to, and how it has transformed them and others into a higher level thinking.